Doctors sometimes use psychiatrists as a weapon to silence people who are chronically ill or who might have complex and rare disease that they basically don't want to deal with. I don't know if they believe their own BS when it comes to dismissing these people, or if they're just being, lazy or, jaded, discriminating, or just don't want to deal with it. But for whatever reason, or for all of those reasons, when these doctors encounter people who are having multiple complaints and who are pushy, these doctors don't like it. They often have this ego, right? The God complex. And so they don't like it when a person is trying to find solutions, especially when they're doing their own research. They hate that and they pathologize that quite heavily. So they tend to talk these people into going and seeing a psychiatrist initially to talk about stress, anxiety, and depression. And the doctor's talking to the psychiatrist on the side and, relaying these negative things about this patient so that the psychiatrist almost has a preconceived notion of the patient. And the psychiatrist diagnoses the patient with anxiety or psychosomatic disorder. So you think something's happening to you, but it's not because you're neurotic and scared. Histrionic, like trying to get attention, even factitious. And these labels, this person is then labeled with that and it goes on their medical file. And it's dangerous because if the person is becoming chronically ill with symptoms, with, some kind of complex disease, often a disease that the medical system doesn't want to deal with. And those diseases are things like my condition, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, Lyme disease, chronic fatigue, myalgic encephalomyelitis, fibromyalgia, those kind of things that they don't really know how to, diagnose them in tests. And, it's not like lupus or MS. You can diagnose those in a test. Those other ones that I mentioned don't have a definitive diagnostic route. And so those are the ones that tend to get dismissed in this way. And doctors literally throw people to the side who are like this, using that tactic of, referring them to a psychiatrist and having the psychiatrist label them negatively. When that label goes in the file, it makes it a lot harder for the person to get help. So even if they're being referred to specialists or they show up at the hospital, this shows up on their file. This is dangerous. My dad had a girlfriend that died in the hospital because she had an aortic dissection. She may have had the same condition as me because just a couple weeks before she died, she and I were, laughing about hypermobile elbows. My elbow goes back like that, and her elbow went back like that. We were both like, and I was like, hey, your elbow's hypermobile. And she had issues with chronic pain. She was a lovely lady. It's very sad what happened. She lost her life because she had, started dissecting, and they did a typical cardiac test, and it didn't show anything. But you can't take the typical cardiac, I think the ECG, it doesn't necessarily show a dissection until it's like way far gone and far too late kind of thing. You need particular testing like a sound Doppler and things like that. And so she didn't get that. So she died in the hallway on a cot, I believe, in the hospital in front of my dad, because they just ignored her and they're like, well, we don't know what's going on. And it was to the point that she couldn't walk. She was dragging her leg, and it was messy. And I'm sorry if this upsets anyone. I should put an annotation with a trigger warning on that. Why did they treat her like that? She had anxiety, depression, and stuff like that on her file. Her bag, her purse contained psychiatric meds. So this, just because even if someone has a psychiatric condition, it does not mean that they're not sick, injured, or, acutely ill or having an emergency or anything like that. Medical professionals should just bloody well know better. You would think they would, but a lot of them don't. So not only do they not know better, seemingly, but again, they use psychiatry as a weapon Psychiatry should be there to help people who are genuinely suffering with mental illness. And I'm not trying to say mental illness is a shame, because there are people who definitely have mental illness as well as physical illness. And when they do, I mean, that makes it even harder. It's really important that physicians treat people with both mental and physical illness with respect and treat their physical symptoms with respect, and don't just pass it off, write it off as part of their mental illness. Because doing that is actually quite dangerous. Like in my dad's girlfriend's case, I'm not going to say her name out of respect. So this kind of structural violence needs to end. It's almost adolescent like it's like these doctors are acting like a bunch of gossipy high school teenagers or something like that. You know, it would be nice if they would be more adult and objective about these matters, and it just kind of shows that I guess society and systems are immature and need to grow. So I'm seeing that with the pandemic that there's been some change in the positive way, and let's hope it keeps going that way, because so many people have been hurt and it needs to stop.